Well, hello and welcome to the IDM Masters interview series where we talk with industry leaders to help you, the listeners, gain insight about the best tools and practices from people on the front line to help you effectively secure your enterprise. On today's show, we have Jeff Ingalls and David Steadman, authors of the upcoming book, Identity Management 2016 Handbook. David is a senior escalation engineer at Microsoft in the product support group around identity management, where he supports a number of various global customers around the Microsoft identity management tool set. Also joining us is Jeff Ingalls. Jeff currently works out of his Ohio home, working in identity and access management. Jeff has been working with these Microsoft technologies for over 20 years. Especially with the identity management software since its inception in 2003. Was that Jeff Zoomich or MIS that you got your start?
MIS, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think there's some people that beat me out there for sure.
Okay.
Just recently that did Zoomit.
How'd you get into MIS back then?
Yeah, so I was working for a large company that we had homegrown our own identity system back early 2000, and Microsoft came out with MIS, which was buying Zoomit and rebranding it, and I picked the short straw. They said, "Hey, it's yours to get up and running," which was very painful because there were no books or really much of any information. I was kind of thinking throughout the whole book process. Like, I remember back in 2003 saying, I should write a book about this. And then
you would have only known.
Yeah, 13 years later.
What when you got going on MIS, what were you writing your rule extension code in? Were you doing an MV provision code? Were you doing C# or VB.NET, or what did you kind of come at it from?
We did VB.NET, and it was mostly because it was easier for other team members to read the code in VB.NET. There was a little bit more comfortable. People were a little bit more comfortable in VB.NET at the time.
Yeah, and I think the documentation, if I recall, way back when, was mostly VB.NET, and then I guess it moved over to C#. But
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, most of the samples were definitely VB. So.
How about you, David? How did you get into, I guess maybe to step back, what product did you first get going?
So I first got going, it was MIS back in the day. I think the very first thing I started working with was a large company like Jeff. They were utilizing the suite to use for self-migration. So way back when, we actually had a tool that we integrated with MMS and a web service for self-migrations for organizations, almost like you see with the current cloud today. So it's almost like flashbacks sometimes. Again, better technology today, but way back when, we had to stitch it together with duct tape and glue and whatever else we could find.
Sure. I know, and a lot of gray hairs, it sounds like, under that process.
Yes.
So how did you two come to meet and collaborate?
So Jeff and I met. I came on as a PFE, and I believe Jeff came on as a Premier Field Engineer shortly after or before, somewhere around the same time, give or take a couple months. And we just started collaborating internally, just seeing currently what the Premier Field Engineers were doing around FIM and sort of changing that landscape. And that's sort of where we met.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we taught our first training class together.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
How did you all like the training aspect or being trainers?
You know what? I think being trainers is a great thing. Not only just teaching folks, but also understanding their thinking, right? So everyone has a different type of thinking, and some labs are harder than others for most folks. And being able to adjust or on the fly, as I call it, during those situations is definitely good. And also engaging with them, right? Understanding what they're trying to accomplish within their business with the tool set. So.
Right. Do you still serve as a trainer, or are you strictly on the more the escalation side now?
So now I'm mostly on the escalation side. Again, I do internal training for engineers, but for the most part, I am escalation. But we do have time to time where we have to talk with the customer via live meeting or some type of session to help them understand what's going on. So.
Okay, but you're not in the classroom actively teaching anymore.
Nope, not in the classroom these days, anyways.
Okay, so guys, let's talk about the book for a little bit. So how did this idea, besides Jeff's brainchild for MIS, come about? What was the inspiration here for the book?
We got contacted. I think.
It's always a good way to just get a book deal. I was contacted.
Yeah, I think the sort of start of the book was sort of reading the previous book and then just hearing the reviews, and then of course thinking, okay, wouldn't it be nice if, and of course the topic of identity management as a whole is huge, right? I mean, there's so many parts of it. It's like, okay, where do we begin?
Sure.
So I think the sort of idea of a new book and sort of a engineer side of the book, because Jeff and myself we support from a support standpoint, right? So a lot of books are sort of this is how-to type of ideas, and we wanted to get it a little bit more depth for those folks that are going to get the call to say, hey, this isn't working or that's not working or whatever the case is. So a little bit more depth. We tried anyways.
Okay. Yeah, we're kind of looking for more of like an intermediate book, and by no means are we saying anything foul or bad about any of the previous books. The Best Practice book by Lundell or the FIM 2010 R2 Handbook. Both are great books, right? And there's a lot of smart people out there. I kind of look at my role as more of a aggregating some of this data and then putting in some of my spin from teaching class of what worked when teaching people the topics, and then kind of looking at more from a support standpoint. And the previous few books have been more architecturally and stuff, and they've been great. We're support guys, and so we've seen the good and the bad, and so a lot of it was even from the training class. Some of the feedback there was, hey, we need a troubleshooting section, right? So, okay, well, we're going to put a troubleshooting chapter in the book because that's something that we know people want.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting to hear that take on it because I guess similar to y'all, when I do my implementations, I still lean pretty heavily on David Lundell's book for even a lot of the installation guides and just kind of my checklist, and so it's a great resource. And it sounds like with your book moving more towards the support side, if you will, on the troubleshooting type of things, I think that's going to be an interesting companion to, like you said, the David Lundell's book as well. So, okay, cool. So let's see. Why don't we talk about, so what was the writing collaboration process like between you two? So David, you're over in just north of DC. David, you're outside of Cincinnati. What was it like writing the book together?
Yeah, so once we started the collaboration, it was definitely interesting to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this, and sort of the timelines. And of course, as we looked at all the, we had to reread some books and just figure out, okay, how do we plan this out? So definitely collaboration, and of course, figuring out what we're going to talk about. Again, we had all these great ideas, so it's just a matter of, okay, what's going to fit and not fit. And then as far as getting the collaboration, I think it was several late-night calls, and just continuing on from there. So definitely a lot of late nights just with Skype and collaboration with Jeff.
So how often were you all writing? Was it every day, or kind of take me through that process of how you with
so
all
it,
your
so it felt like every day. But I think for the most part, balancing the book and balancing work life and kids, school, whatever else comes along, definitely is a challenge. So I would say every other day or every spare half an hour that you could get, you're like, I can bang out a couple paragraphs here and there.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it's just trying to fit it all in together, and then at the end of the day, if you get a page done, at least you accomplish something for that day.
Right.
A lot of the collaboration was really just, I think, back when we worked together with at Microsoft, right? I mean, one great thing that I learned at Microsoft is that if you find someone that you click with, and pretty much everyone at Microsoft is pretty passionate about their jobs. If you find someone that you click with, then you can get a lot of work done because you can trust one another, right? I completely trust David's technical abilities. And so when we were kind of figuring out what we wanted to do, we said, all right, here are the chapters that we want to write on. And the publisher certainly helped us a little bit with that. Like, hey, I need you to write about, this or that or whatever. So we kind of filled out the chapters. And then a lot of it was just like, okay, David, you take this chapter, Jeff take this other chapter, and we split it out that way. And then we certainly are reviewing each other's chapters and kind of helping each other along, like, oh, you should, word it this way or whatever. But a lot of it's just, trusting one another, and I'm writing kind of 50% of the book, and David's writing, the other 50%. That, and with the online technology that we have, it's pretty easy for us to collaborate between Ohio and DC.
Sure. What would you say some of the biggest challenges are that you faced while writing the book?
I think the biggest challenge, and I'm not going to speak for Jeff, but the biggest challenge is when we started the book, MIM was RTM, or MIM was in like pre-beta, right?
Sure.
So some things worked, some things didn't work, some things we had to wait for a possible fix or a possible go ahead and install this new version. And then after the pre-release, when it went RTM, then that sort of got easier from there. And then, of course, managing I call it the lab infrastructure was probably my biggest challenge. Jeff is smiling, but I felt like the lab support guy. But it definitely was needed in order to be able to get some good infrastructure up to support the book. So, and that's one aspect of the book that is definitely challenging is, okay, what is all the servers involved and what do you need in order to get a good concrete book?
Yeah, I completely underestimated the whole setup of the lab. And fortunately, David had like some of the infrastructure, so he was always doing, the lab rat doing the stuff. But even the install, and a lot of our book goes over the install of every one of the components, at least as far as I can recall anyway. All the big components. And so just the install piece sometimes took several weeks for me to, because of kids and whatever. I would have to, I'd do just a little piece of it, right? Get a screen capture, write a little paragraph, and then, okay, now I got to, put the kids to bed or whatever, and I got to do some other things. And so it just took kind of a long time to get through some of the installs. And then, we ran into some, bugs or whatnot. And, that's going to happen when a product's not installed. But I have to say that the biggest challenge for me was really, David was extremely gracious. I was going through grad school at the time that the book was kind of, or we signed the contract for the book. And so David was kind of waiting on me. And so there were nights where, I would get done with my assignments at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I'm like, yeah, I can't write tonight. And then it happened for about a month or 2 months, and then 3 months, and then and then I'm like, okay, are we still going to do the book? And David's kind of waiting patiently, and I'm like, yeah, we're going to do the book. And so the publisher was really cool with this too, and I said, it's just grad school, and then my grandfather died, and then we had a child, and it was just like every single life
Oh my God.
thing that like came in, and I'm like in grad school, I'm like, all right, this is really being tested here. Do I really want to write the book or not? But
I mean, you maximized your time. I mean, you should have tried to written an opera also while this was going on or something to try to load your plate up a little bit more.
yeah, it was really crazy. It's one of those things where like you don't have any plans, and then all of a sudden, five different friends will ask you over to dinner. It's you usually don't have that much to
Yeah, it's definitely, and I can concur with what Jeff's saying, because writing the book and then all of a sudden, like you have this grand plan, like this weekend I'm gonna focus nothing but on the book, and then all of a sudden the sky falls, and like in my case, I was gonna work on the book, and then we had a makeup soccer game, and then from there I had to be on a support crit sit for all weekend, and it just was okay. That plan did not work at all.
Wow. So it sounds like the book writing strategy was wherever you could steal 30 minutes or so to bang out a chapter, do an install or whatever.
Yeah, it's all about time management.
Well, so what did it feel like to finally finish when you finally dragged this thing over the finish line?
Are we finished? We're still actually going through some of the editing phases, actually. So that's maybe it's going to be one of your other questions, is like why we have to wait so long for the book. So we're kind of polishing up some of the remaining chapters, and then getting the chapter reviews back from our editor or our reviewers.
Yeah, the team of reviewers. But yeah, I think in January, when we were on this downhill, when you sort of crest the big mountain we just climbed, and then you're on the downhill slide, I think we're on that downhill slide, and we're enjoying it. It was almost like a finally.
Well, you can see the finish line. That's
right.
Nice
Exactly.
That you've just got to keep running for a little bit longer, and it'll be there. I think when I looked on Amazon last night, they had the book availability as August 2016. Is that still what you all are tracking?
I thought the publisher had June. So there may be a few months or so before the publisher releases it to Amazon.
I think it depends on their internal review process. So when we're completely done, it's really up to them to decide when they're gonna. But I mean, that doesn't sound too far off, because June, July, August, 1 or 2 months slip, which I think at this point is okay.
Right. So I think it's safe to say that sometime mid to late summer we'll see the book out, and I'm sure that you all will be putting out updates kind of based on how the edits and the final go, if you will, from the publisher.
Microsoft terms, that'd be like before Q3, I think, right?
Well, exactly.
Right.
So, you could even push it out to 2017 and still make that model. So, now that you've gone through or finishing up the book writing process here, I've never written a book myself, but would you ever want to go through this process again?
I think so. My first reaction is like no, but then my second reaction is over the overall book writing process, I think we've learned a couple things. So you always wonder, like, what is it like to write a book? Well, it's a lot of work. So the folks before us that have written books, I applaud them, because it is a lot of work and a lot of back and forth. Getting the information in the book and sort of making it a whole book is definitely a lot of work, to making sense of the chapters, right? So would I do it again? I think with lessons learned, I think I could do it more efficiently.
Sure.
And then not making this big process, right? When we first started out of the book writing, we had these like long, extravagant chapters, and as we were going through it, we're like, wow, we're not going to be able to fit this in there. So I think understanding what you can put in, and then removing all the pie in the sky. Like, wouldn't it be great if?
Right. You got to get down to brass tacks.
Yep. So I don't know if Jeff agrees, but I think that would be the.
So David's answer is, yeah, he'd write a book, but not with me. I think it's just kind of yeah. So the book writing thing is, it's kind of like looking at a FIM implementation that you didn't write. Like when you first look at it, you kind of are, you go in, you may be a little critical, and you say, oh, why did they do it this way? And I remember when reading some of the books, I was kind of thinking, well, why was it written like this? And then when you go in and you do it yourself, you start questioning that too. You're like, well, it makes sense for me to start this way, right? And so it is very tricky to, I would say, just kind of get started. And then we kind of both found, like, I know in certain chapters, we realized, like, we could write an entire book about certain chapters, and so we had to kind of trim it back and say, all right, we can't. This book is not about FIM-CM or whatever, right? It's
come on, FIM-CM.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, everyone loves FIM-CM.
I know. Well, that's a good segue into maybe talking a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of the book. So, from y'all's standpoint, what would you say are let's say maybe the top 2-3 new MIM features that every MIM professional should be aware of that you cover in the book? And I don't want to necessarily limit it to those 2 or 3, but maybe as a starting point, talk about what you would say those 2 or 3 areas that would be of the most interest to the audience might be.
I think the most interest, CM aside, because CM is sort of my little nest egg here, but from a new feature standpoint would be PAM. Would you agree, Jeff? I think that's sort of the new shiny, I call it the new shiny button. And then right below that would be around the new CM sort of items. But I think the new shiny in this book would probably be PAM. Again, Sync Engine is still there. It's great,
sure.
Right? The FIM portal, or MIM portal as they call it, again, one and the same. Still there. Nothing too shiny other than the phone call that you get from Azure. So
password reset thing too, right? There's one organization that they wanted to go to MIM just for the new feature of self-service password reset, where you can self-unlock your account. And okay, so there are some great aspects, or some interesting aspects. Is it a ton of stuff? No, I think all of us in the community would realize, say that no, it's not a ton of new features, but that's kind of good in some ways, right? Because you know that stuff's not going to necessarily break, right? Like you have what you had before, and then we're adding a little bit more. So, yeah, PAM is I think the big shiny thing.
So from a high level, could you maybe take a few minutes, explain what PAM is and why, say, from a management and even a technical perspective, someone might be interested in PAM?
So PAM is, I call it like one spear or one defense mechanism that you can use to prevent someone malicious attacking domain assets.
So just real quick, so for the listeners, when we say PAM, we're talking about privileged access management. So, sorry, I just wanted to make sure we got that acronym out there for those that aren't necessarily familiar with PAM.
Yeah, so what PAM allows you to do is kind of get rid of the permanent membership of elevated groups. And what that really means in a nutshell is that you're standing up this new management infrastructure. I think I call it a management forest in the book, or like a red forest. And essentially using that new management forest to manage group membership in your corporate forests. And how that works is through kind of these shadow groups, and it's essentially based around SID history of between the corporate forests and your new management forest. So what happens is, from an end user's point of view, if I need to get into this elevated group, I submit a PowerShell request, or maybe go through some custom portal that's been developed. I submit a request, and then based upon some configuration that's already done, if I get approved, maybe it's an auto-approved type of thing, my secondary administrative account gets added to this group. And
Okay.
so it's kind of that simple. What I'd say customers would not maybe initially like about it is the fact that you have to have a management forest, and there's probably a lot of pushback on that. Some of the bigger customers out there are already going to have a red forest, and so they can just utilize that existing management forest. And those that only have a single forest today, you're going to have to stand up another forest. And is it going to be a huge investment? I'd say it's probably not going to be a huge investment. The reason being is that you can stand up a new forest in a couple servers.
Sure.
And with technology now, it's it's relatively cheap. And so anyway, this new management forest essentially has these shadow groups, and the shadow user count in this managed forest gets added to the shadowed group in the management forest, and that essentially allows you to utilize the group within the corporate forests without being a permanent member of the group. What happens is PAM uses a service to yank out that group membership after a certain duration of time, whether it means 10 minutes or whatever. So there's not really much to it other than a couple services. I think you have to have the MIM service, you have to have the a couple PAM services, and you have to have this management forest.
Gotcha. And you go into the implementation in good detail for PAM inside of the book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think.
So another reason to buy the book, everybody.
And I think I'll touch upon what Jeff was talking about is the setup is quite. If anyone set up a forest, a resource forest, they're aware of this. But I think the main thing around the new concept of this priv forest, as a lot of the documentation refers to, the real reason of going through that is some of the scenarios that we have too many admins. And of course, the main thing is we want to address the current threat of lateral movement.
Sure.
And again, we have many recommendations. We have all these acronyms that are out there. So we have PAM, Privilege Access Management. So that's where you're setting up that red zone, as Jeff called it. And you could have multiple priv environments. So let's say you have one for all your applications. And then you have your one for your really critical red zone, like domain admins or database admins. So there's multiple ways to sort of circumvent this and make it sort of the pie in the sky for your customers. Because the one thing that your customer hates to hear is that they've been breached, right? So that's sort of the assumed breach. So when we say assumed breach, so you're going to hear that from security folks as, oh, well, you've been breached. Well, guess what? The customer is not going to like to hear that. But they need to hear that because a lot of the folks that we talk to have already been compromised. So going into it saying with the expectation that you already think you've been compromised is a good thought process, right? You're a little bit more elevated in making sure things are done. So one thing that we have out there is called PAW, right? The opposite of PAM, right? So when you go with PAM, PAW fits nicely in that PAW stands for Privileged Access Workstation. So when you're standing up your PAM environment for the first time, we recommend or highly recommend standing up the PAW workstation in conference to manage your PAM environment. So you're removing, okay, if you're logging on to the PAM environment with your workstation that, again, we're assuming the breach has already occurred, your credentials could be already compromised. So standing up that added layer of the Privileged Access Workstation is highly recommended for this scenario, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I could really touch in on that. So really, what are we kind of solving when we stand up a PAM? It's really one piece is we're eliminating bad practices, right? Like in the past, people will run their normal day-to-day account as a domain admin, right? They're looking at email, they're browsing the internet, and then account's domain admin, right? They're logging into a workstation as domain admin, right?
Right.
And so when a hacker comes along, they grab that hash that's cached on that workstation, and awesome, now they have the hash for a domain admin account, and they can go anywhere they want, right? And so with the PAW, right? PAW is going to essentially give you a trusted workstation, right? Which is good. That kind of shuts down some pieces of a hacker's arsenal. And then with the privileged access management piece, what that does is it eliminates the permanent membership of these elevated groups, right? So if I'm a normal user, let's just take a look at it like a insider threat scenario. If I'm an internal person, Active Directory is read-only by default. Certainly lock down certain aspects of it. But as a normal user, I can do a query on who's domain admins, and I can say, oh look, here are the 300 people that are domain admins. Hopefully it's not that many, but okay, so I have 300 people now that I can target, right, through phishing attacks or whatever. Have them come in and log on to my workstation as domain admin, whatever, and now I've got it. So it's PAM is really kind of, I would say, it's about kind of reinforcing best practices through technology. Boy, that sounds like a good buzz phrase.
No, that's perfect.
And I think, Scott, as far as the insider threat that Jeff talks about, and I think there was a study done that typical attacks, the actual attacker will sit on your network for roughly around 200 days. That is a huge amount of time to go and say, hey, what else is going on in this environment?
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up, and not to pick on Target, but obviously they had a very high-profile breach the other year, and it was those type of things, right? That they were able to get a hold of a compromised vendor account, and they were able to, the hackers set up a base camp, if you will, to observe the network for a very long time. So I think that statement is very pertinent for what a typical breach may look like, where someone gets in and they are observing the network for undetected for a very long time, where they can map out what is going on, what those domain admins are, who they need to be targeting.
Yep. And we do have another arsenal in our sort of back pocket when we talk about PAM and PAW, and here comes another buzzword is ATA, which is the Advanced Threat Analytics, right? So we have several security boundaries and security monitoring tools that allow customers, while they're setting up this environment, that they can implement in their current domain to say, is there any current known threats out there in my current environment? And Advanced Threat and Analytics actually shows you this. It doesn't need to be It's rather quick to set up, and it just collects information around your domain controllers only, right? So it will look for that information and say, hey, Jeff is logging on more than he really should. You might want to look into that.
Now is the ATA, is that a aggregated service inside of Azure where that's all rolling up?
No, so it is a on-prem server. You stand up, you target your domain controllers, and essentially it just monitors that traffic for anomalies, right? It looks for the pasta hash. It looks for any known sort of infiltration analytics, and then reports on that saying, hey, this workstation is trying to log in doing XYZ, and it looks like an anomaly, right? It looks like usually Jeff doesn't log in 380 times in the last hour.
Right.
So it's definitely another arsenal that is at your and you can go out to Microsoft and take a look at it, but it's definitely one of those tools that I would highly recommend as we're setting up this security boundary for your security folks.
Well, it sounds like you and Jeff need to get back in the lab and put together a little demo for everyone on this. I mean, it certainly sounds...
We have an awesome lab, actually. I was thinking today, we really need to sell this lab.
You need to start putting some demo videos out. You all are sitting on some really good stuff out here. So let's move on to another topic that I'm particularly interested in, and I'm sure, I think this is one of David's also, but the new CM in MIM 2016. I know that in working with the FIM CM, it was still not necessarily super advanced and had some areas where it needed to be improved. Maybe y'all could talk a little bit about what's new in CM certificate management.
Most definitely. So I think the biggest thing is as we talk about CM, CLM, the user interface is as is, right? I mean, we know it's legacy, I call it, but it still does the job that it was intended to do, which is great. It still can issue as a proxy for your customers, self-service, for user-based certificates, whether it's virtual smart cards or soft certs. So I think in comparison between FIM and MIM, the one thing is the modern app, right? The modern app gives a new light to, instead of using the ActiveX plugin, you can use the modern app. And then the major thing I think is great is cross-force scenarios. So being able to have a user force be able to request certificates on your resource forest, that's a huge plus. That's been an ask for ever since CLM days, right? Hey, I have multi-forest. Sorry.
Right.
So I think that's a big thing. And then, of course, if you don't like the UI, we have the REST API, which is great now. We only, and that was a new add, which provides management lookup of smart cards and profiles, where in the past you would have to use the CLM DLL to really automatically get to the CM world, which could be challenging. So the REST API brings a whole new light to, okay, what else can I do? I can create my own web app, right? I just need to call this REST API. So I think that's, from a high level, those are the two features that I'm excited about, is the modern app and the REST API, because it brings to light. Now, all the underpinnings that we've seen in CLM and CM, they're still there, right? They're not going to change the core focus of what CM was about. But I think these two options give a added breadth to CM and what it can do for long term.
Have you? So I know that at least my perception, working with CM and FIM, is that there were, I wouldn't say a ton of customers that were necessarily implementing it. It was, I think, from their standpoint, somewhat difficult to get up and going.
So yeah,
MIM 2000. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I know right where you're going with this, Scott, because I get this question all the time. Well, how many customers do we have running CM? And yes, the overall number of folks using it is limited, but I think the pure limitation is understanding, like you were just saying, getting it up and running.
Right.
Knowing what the permission model is. And there's documents left and right. And I think, like we talked about earlier, about bringing some of this content together. And I think in the current chapter that we have, it brings all those left, right, up, down. I got to go over to this wiki or go over to this wiki and sort of mash it together. I think getting up and running and understanding the permission model is the key, right? Once customers see the permission model and they got to go here and there and all over the place, they run and scream because they're touching Active Directory in areas that is usually you don't have to go do.
Right. Yeah, and that was and I'm glad that you brought that up. Is that was the one thing that was kind of a mind bender, is trying to find one definitive source where all the permissions were listed to try to get the product up and going. Once you got it up and going, it was pretty straightforward. But I think half the challenge was just finding what you really needed to do.
Right, and we touch upon that in the book. We outline it to the nth degree. So start to finish. So hopefully I do see I'm proud with the information.
There you go.
CM and PAM are going to be the big, I think that's why people are going to buy it. I mean, Sync's been around for a long time. Portal's been around for a while too. We're certainly trying to aggregate some of that information in the portal as well. Like we have some customization in the portal in there. We got certainly the install and the configuration and whatnot. But
okay.
Yeah, but it's really just kind of putting it all together. Yeah.
And then as well as I think in the MIM service, we talk about how to create a custom activity and such like that. So I think we do those areas some justice. We're just not touching highly upon them because, well, they've been around, and CM's been around. But
sure.
I would love to see more CM folks at my door.
There you go. Okay, well, good. Well, I know that we've got a few minutes left here on our time together, so that was great information on the book. I'm going to ask a couple of other questions here, maybe not related to the book, but maybe just some other things for people to get to know you all. So we'll do a quick little lightning round here, and feel free to jump in. But what would you say the coolest thing you've ever done with MIM, FIM, ILM, MIS? What's the coolest thing you've ever gotten to do, or that you're most proud of?
Well, I'm gonna kind of cop out on that question, and I'm gonna say, generally speaking, there's kind of two or three things I like. One, I like building the tools for the product where I find gaps that maybe aren't there for existing tools. Second part is I thoroughly enjoy, and I think David would too because that's his job. I thoroughly enjoy just going in and fixing bad deployments. I don't really enjoy the deployment as much as I thought I would. It's I don't want to say it's boring, but to me it's pretty easy in a way to put a new deployment out. I think it's very difficult to get one that lasts a long time, right? But I think overall, I think the biggest joy I kind of get out of the product is the fact that you go in, you save the company a bunch of money, right?
Sure.
You come in and, a lot of times people go in saying, in fact, I had a couple of customers tell me back when I was at Microsoft, actually more than a couple, say, hey, I'm glad that you're here because I'm going to fire a bunch, half my staff. As soon as you help me get this product going. And I'm like, whoa, you feel like you're like the Grim Reaper, going in and I'm like, no, that's not, that's certainly your choice, but you still need someone to run the product, right? You still need some operational people. So I think, generally speaking, it's that. But, we've done some things. I'm doing really fun thing now with managing contacts that's I think kind of clever. I interfaced with a financial aid package not too long ago. Was the first company to do that. So there's some things there. I mean, as far as launching launching something new and fresh, those are always those can be fun. But yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of my take on things. David, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think the coolest thing I've ever done is what I'm doing now. Is
this interview? Wow.
This interview
for you here.
Right. No, so I think from an aspect of, like Jeff was talking about, I like to unravel the mystery, right? So they already have an implementation, they see this issue or that issue, and to be able to unravel the mystery, but not only unravel it, but explain it to the customer, and they have like the light bulb moment, like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. But I think that would be the coolest thing currently is what I do and provide currently. Now, the only other thing that sort of sticks out in my brain is sort of what got me started in this whole process was the coolest thing I've ever done was being able to implement some self-service feature way back in the golden days, right? When the FIM portal didn't exist, well, we had a portal, right? We had those sort of hook-ins, which was amazing. Just to even talk about that, even the portal does today, right? So I think that would be the coolest thing is back in that day, being able to provide that using MIS and multiple ducts, like I said, duct and tape and whatever else we strung together to make that work. But it was amazing just to see how that worked, and then sort of where we are today, of course, with better technology, but almost in the same spot, right? But with a little less duct tape, right?
I built a website for MIS too, David. It's kind of funny you mentioned that. I was just thinking about the other day that I kind of want to revisit it and maybe put it out in the forums. Back in around, it's probably 10 years ago, we had this policy at the organization I was at that no one could have access to the server, right? Like only the server administrators can have access to the server. And so the people that were, helping with identity management, they couldn't see the UI, right? They couldn't log onto the server and go through server, the managed tool. They couldn't see anything. And so the thought was, okay, we'll just let them go through WMI and do queries. I'm like, well, they're not, these people are, you know how difficult it is to try to manage and look at stuff just through WMI. So I built a ASP page that just did a bunch of WMI calls, and it was a complete interface, web-based interface for the UI, and it worked, and it looked just like that. I made it just like it. But at the time, it was like pegging the CPU because of some WMI problems. But it worked really well, for what it needed to do. And I thought, I need to kind of go back and revisit that and see if I can. Well, first, I guess see if I'm still pegging the CPU all the WMI calls. But it was kind of neat because I could see that being a solution for some customers out there that, hey, I need a web-based interface for the synchronization management tool. So, anyway.
Very cool. Well, let's maybe put or look into our crystal ball here and talk about where do you see MIM evolving over the next 2 to 3 years, and maybe even the identity management space. If you want to look out in the next few years, where do y'all see things going, and what should people be aware of?
Well, David owns the crystal ball, so I don't know if we don't want him to lose his job.
Is that the crystal ball in the lab, or the one that actually is?
Well,
so if I had to look at the crystal ball, as Jeff says, hold on, let me find it.
Yeah.
It's not here. But if I had to sort of, and I think everyone can see it, right? If they look at MIM evolving, and then we look at this other thing over here, which is we call the cloud, and we call AD Connect, AD Sync. For you cloud folks, you're familiar with it. So if you look at the two, and I don't know for say what's going to happen, but you can already see some things are happening more quickly on the AD Connect side. I mean, in the past year, we've already had 2 revisions, right? I mean, that thing's just flying off the shelf. Every day there's new stuff. So if I had to look at my crystal ball, I think there will be a convergence of the way we do identity management, even on-prem to the cloud. I think at some point there is going to be a convergence. I mean, that's just the way it happens. I mean, look at Exchange, look at all these other technologies, Link, look at there was writing on the wall back then for them, and now it's a convergence where now, okay, it's second nature. Okay, I go to the Office 365 to manage whatever, right? So if I would have to say my crystal ball would say, I think there's a convergence that's going to happen. Whether it happens in a year, 2 years, 3 years, I can't say. I don't know. But I would say for folks that are looking, okay, what is going to happen with MIM? I don't think anything's going to happen with MIM. I think the way we do MIM might change, or whatever the name of the product's going to be at that time. Because we change it every other week or so. But I would say that we're still going to be taking care of that on-prem solution. We're going to still be taking care of. Now, will it look different? More than likely. Will it act different? More than likely. Will there be new stuff? I hope. So I think it's not a matter of, okay, MIM is going to go away, or identity management will be here until we have no internet, right? So
that's not going
so
away.
I think that's sort of my sort of take on the next 2-3 years, is that I think the more and more as we go to cloud, and again, there are some companies that they can't go to cloud because of restrictions or whatever the case may be. So we still got to take care of those folks, and we will with the identity management package. Again, MIM is still supported until like 20 something, I don't know, for a while. So it's not going away, but I think there will be a logical step, and I say logical because it's just the way we are ever evolving, right?
Exactly. I think that's the key right there. Evolving is that you can see things coming up on the horizon with that convergence that you spoke about.
Yep.
And I think, if we go on to the nitty-gritty components, we see, and I have no knowledge whatsoever of what will really happen on this aspect, but I'll say that it's interesting that we have a RESTful component of PAM, which is the new component. We have a RESTful component now of CM. Are we going to see some more things along more RESTful components? Maybe. I don't know. I would hope that the portal would become a little bit more lightweight. I'd hope that the whole deployment of MIM, and I think that's kind of where David's coming from. When there is sort of this convergence, it'd really be nice to be able to kind of come into an environment and be able to at least get the pieces, installed, not configured, but installed relatively quickly.
Yes.
And there's just so many, you look at just like the reporting feature and Behold and, all these components, like that's a lot of infrastructure to stand up if you want to do all of it, right? And so, I'd love to see that. I don't know if that's going to happen. I guess that this is more of a wish list than I guess maybe what's going to happen. But
Jeff, you just made a good point. Is take in point the reporting aspect, right? It's great we have reporting, right? But then you look at, okay, I got to stand up System Center, I got to stand up data warehouse, I got to do this, got to do this. Well, like in MIM, you can just use the hybrid reporting feature. It's all in JSON format. It gets sent up to Azure, so that's part of the hybrid agent capability. So we're gonna, and I think we're gonna see a little bit more of that as they sort of investigate where they want to go from there. And I just like the whole idea that I can enable reporting to multiple different tiers of reporting engines. If I don't want to use System Center reporting service, and I just want the data, I can
Right.
I can enable that feature, and I can suck that data out of the event log and send it over to some JSON-compatible query analyzer and put it wherever I want it. And I think that's huge, right? That opens the door for so many other solutions that it just makes a good fit for sort of those auditing and recording type of features that are out there that we have, not only just System Center, but other products out there, or even just your own homegrown product. As Jeff mentioned, he likes to create WMI products.
So much. No, it's really just finding a gap, right? I mean, when you are limited by company bureaucracy and red tape, right?
Yeah.
You kind of have to be creative in the operations world, and I think I'd say that both of us are more on the support type of lines where you kind of just have to figure out creative ways to do those types of things, right? So,
and I think there are a lot of people that are in that situation as well. So, well, good. Well, we're coming up to the end here. So we talked a little earlier about the book coming out mid to late summer. Where's the best place for people to order the book?
So the best place is if you go to PAC Publishing, and you'll be able to search their site and look for the Microsoft Identity Manager 2016.
Okay, perfect. We'll get that into the show notes there. Well, Jeff and David, it has been fantastic talking with you all. How can the listeners keep in touch with you and find out what you're up to?
So,
you have
for me, I have a blog. Also, I am on Twitter. My Twitter handle is FimGuy. So you'll be able to find me there. I post every now and then, so you can follow me there on possibly what I'm doing or not doing.
Okay.
So that would be probably the preferred. And then, of course, if you go out to the TechNet blogs, I have a blog out there as well. So.
Yeah, just
Jeff,
put
how about you?
I'm not a really big Twitter person, but I'm starting to try. I have one out there. I think it's at MIM 2016 Handbook, and I'm on the forums a lot, or at least I try to be. And then inglesdesigns.com too, if you want to grab me.
Okay, perfect. Well, guys, it has been great catching up with you all, hearing about the new book, hearing about the writing process, and all the new stuff with PAM and CM coming out for MIM 2016. So I'm definitely looking forward to the book. Looking forward to seeing more demos coming out of your secret lab here as well. So it's something to look forward to. So, well, great. Well, guys, thanks again. This was an awesome conversation, and we will talk with you soon.
Cool. Thanks,
all right,
Matt.
Scott. Appreciate it.